What's up, guys? Welcome back to Josh Daver and welcome to a brand new channel, Josh Daver Reacts. And today we'll be reacting to a video called the last 24 hours of death row, of what a death row prisoner would look like. So this is the final stage of death row before walking into the execution chamber. Dead man walking.
The time of writing, there are 2,738 inmates on death row in the United
Jesus. So if you get the amount of people in my college, including myself, multiply it times that by 1. Double it. Oh my god. What have people been doing to get themselves on there?
States. This number can change quite frequently, given that some prisoners, of course, might be executed, but others might have their sentence commuted. They might have their sentence overturned, or someone else might join them on death row. Right now, only 2% of people on death row are women. 42% of people are classified as white, 41% black, 13% Latino, 1.9% Asian, 1% Native American, and the rest is stated as unknown. You can be on death row for a long, long time. And believe it or not, the average time spent there from sentencing to the day in the execution chamber is 20 years. Let's now see what happens on that final day, 8 p.m. The inmate is taken from death row to another cell. This involves a drive from the prison to what one former official in a documentary called the Death House. That official said prior to leaving death row and getting in the van to come to the death house, the inmate will be searched really well. He said this wasn't only because a weapon might harm a guard, but mainly because they don't want the prisoner committing suicide. Another guard interviewed said he once took a route to the death house where they couldn't be ambushed. Tensions are high during these events. He also said the atmosphere in the van was solemn. We all knew where we were going and why. Nobody said a whole lot. Once the prisoner goes into the death house, he won't ever see the light of day again, unless some kind of appeal works for him. 9 p.m. After booking in, he can sleep until he's awakened, if indeed he can sleep. We managed to find the diary of one prisoner who described his move to his new cell. They stripped me out with a female officer present, he wrote. Now, personally, I'm not the shy type, but having a female
Are they actually having a laugh? Jesus.
officer on death watch is just one more humiliation. We're told that during this time, the prisoner is on something called death watch. He's watched all the time in case he tries to take his own life. The cell is close to the execution chamber and it is very private, a space where the inmate can reflect on life as the hours count down. This might happen just one day before, but we found cases where it was a couple of days. Prisoners will also be given special clothes in most cases, much smarter than prison attire. The man who kept the diary wrote he was happy to have at last a pair of trousers with a button and zip. We don't know how well he slept.
So if you don't know, basically, if you don't know what death row is, or capital punishment is a form of punishment where you are basically sentenced to death. And you don't know my full agreement on how I see death row and stuff, but I've told my grandparents how I feel about this, all this topics and stuff, and my brother wants to go to Disney, but I have told them a point that has actually been proven true in some circumstances, and because most of my family is against it, we will not be travelling to America for the foreseeable future, I don't think.
In his diary, he comments about watching the guards sleep. This is what he wrote. Good for them. I'm sure this has to be stressful for them. So a moment's relaxation is well earned. I also enjoy the irony. Who exactly is watching whom? One other thing he says is that the death house is much cleaner than his death row cell. He remarks that there's not a bug in sight, whereas in his last cell, it was like going on safari. 4:30 a.m. The inmate is woken up bright and early in his cell. We should add here times might change from place to place. Petitions might still be pending, and there's a phone right outside the cell. In the cell, there's a shower, a toilet, a bed, and a desk. During this last day, the prisoner is allowed to see family and can be visited by a chaplain. As for calling people, the inmate can write down a list of phone numbers he intends to call and give that to the guards. One guard interviewed said we would dial the number for him and then allow him
So
to...
basically, as you're gonna hear in a few minutes from the video, basically go subscribe to the Infographics Show because I do watch a lot of their content and it can be quite interesting. But basically, how I see it is, you pay taxes, your tax goes to the government goes to the state, right? The tax goes to the state, and about just under half of the states have to cap the death penalty. And in those states, if you go to, hence why, because Tui fly, if Tui fly to different states where because we only fly Tui, so if Tui didn't fly to Florida, didn't just fly to Florida and other places, then we could look into it. But yeah, but this is actually, some of it's true in this one I'm about to say, but if you go into a Mackey's into a state, i.e. Florida, which has death penalty, and you buy a Mackey's and you buy a Big Mac from a Mackey's, that Big Mac, the tax off that Big Mac can potentially end someone's life on death row. So if you go to a Mackey's and you buy something from there and you pay tax on it, that money, that tax will go to the state, and that could potentially end someone's life. So whenever you go somewhere for a bite to eat, and you want to earn money and you think it'll be alright, you've got to think where that money's going. And that money on a state where they've got the death penalty can potentially end someone's life.
Call. But after the prisoner has called the last person on his list, the only person he'll have to talk to is the chaplain. We're told that after this last call, it can be a very traumatic time. One chaplain interviewed said I was to do everything and anything to help him face that last day. Whatever it was, writing letters, making phone calls, singing songs, listening, and listening. 8 a.m. We said they can have visitors, but 8 a.m. is the cutoff time. After that, the prisoner is on his own, besides having prison staff around and, of course, anyone involved in his case should something change. The chaplain can still visit too. At around this time, in the actual death chamber, it's very likely that the equipment will be tested. This might mean checking that the straps on the gurney work, or even checking the phone to the governor's office is working. Yep, imagine it wasn't and there was a last-minute reprieve. If the form of execution is the chair, then its electrical components have to be tested. In one case we found, the actual governor was the person who they strapped in to test if he could get out or move out of the straps. I didn't want my staff to get kicked in the face, he remarked. 10:30 a.m. Now it's lunchtime. Yes, this is an early lunch, but let's not forget the inmate has been up a long time already. Lunch is not special, it's not the last meal. From what we can see, it's the same old prison food. The only difference is that the prisoner gets to eat it in a private setting. The inmate we talked about before said what he got for lunch was orange juice and what he called a prison-issue donut. For quite a few hours now, the prisoner has a lot of time to think, and as you know, they have a desk and can write any number of letters, goodbyes, or just reflect on life. 3 p.m. If the inmate is to get the electric chair, he'll have his head shaved around this time. But this...
I generally completely disagree with the death penalty. It's interesting to learn about and react to, but I just completely disagree with it. Should be no chances or anything. It needs to, guys. It needs to go. Literally, this is like the worst thing someone can go through after committing a crime. I've done the time on death row, but the government and the state does not have a right to take away a life, because technically, in the way the system works, that executioner who ended that life should be sentenced, and if murder is a capital punishment, then that executioner should be done for murder and should be given the death penalty if it was to work properly, and they'll be stuck in this circle. So it's broken and it needs to go.
Also happen later in the day. He might still talk to a spiritual advisor, but food might also be on his mind right now. Around this time, maybe an hour or so later, the inmate will also be asked to dress in one of those smart clothes he's been given. He'll be asked to take a shower before he does this, a shower at least in total privacy. He'll have already written down what he wants to eat, so in the kitchen, the death house chef will be doing all the preparations. 4 p.m. The inmate will receive his last meal. Contrary to popular belief, inmates can't just order what they want. It makes sense because it's highly unlikely that authorities would splash out on the finest Wagyu beef. In Florida, for instance, the maximum this last meal can cost is $40. But this will change from state to state. Those poor convicts over in Oklahoma only get a limit of $15, or at least when one documentary we watched was made. That is hardly enough to go crazy on your last meal. It's still good, though. As one death house chef pointed out, this meal is the only choice of food they might have had in 2 decades. In some states, though, prisoners no longer get a bespoke last meal and only get the usual prison food. To give you an idea of what inmates might choose, we will list some last meals. Serial killer John Wayne Gacy had 12 fried shrimp, an entire bucket of KFC, some French fries, and a whole load of strawberries.
Honestly, to be honest, I do like the popcorn chicken from KFC, but if it got the bucket thingy, I get really bad indigestion after it. I don't know why. I just do.
The man behind the Oklahoma bombing, Timothy McVeigh, just opted for 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream. A killer from Florida called Angel Nieves Diaz chose absolutely nothing. The terrible Ted Bundy did pretty much the opposite, ordering a steak cooked medium rare, eggs on the side, over easy, some hash browns, slices of toast, and some milk and juice. The infamous female serial killer Eileen Wuornos was good with just a cup of coffee, while a murderer called Stephen Woods must have been famished. We should add that many thought he was innocent, and his last words were, "You're not about to witness an execution, you're about to witness a murder." Before that, he asked to eat, according to the website Ranker, 2 pounds of bacon, a large 4-meat pizza, 4 fried chicken breasts, 2 drinks each of Mountain Dew, Pepsi, root beer, and sweet tea, 2 pints of ice cream, 5 chicken fried steaks, 2 hamburgers with bacon, fries, and a dozen garlic breadsticks with marinara on the side. That state must have had a big budget. 5 p.m. The witnesses will likely arrive at the prison. This might be family of the victims, journalists, family of the condemned, friends of the condemned, or whoever the condemned has asked to be witnesses. They will be told to try and stay quiet when they reach the witness room. Before that, they'll wait somewhere else. In most states, civilians who didn't know anyone involved will be asked to witness the execution. 6 to 8 p.m. The time of execution can vary from state to state, but it's just about always in the early evening. At this point, the prisoner will be taken to the execution room. The witnesses will soon be in the witness room. Prisoners, for the most part, will just walk right there and not give the guards any problems. In some states, this will be a 5-man team, just in case there is a struggle. But that doesn't happen often. One warden interviewed who had done 89 executions said he'd only had 1 prisoner that was hard to deal with. The walk to the chamber in most places is only about 10 feet, just over 3 meters. The guys would usually walk right up to the electric chair. They weren't forced by the staff. By that point, they've already accepted what will happen. A former Death Watch guard told Business Insider. Another guard in a separate interview said the same. Inmates usually act very dignified. It's a very clean procedure. There's no hustling and bustling. It's not always this way, especially if the prisoner's protesting is innocent.
I'm sorry, I just had to pause and literally. How is this legal? You're basically forcing someone to sit on a chair, flick a lever, and he gets like thousands of volts to his body. How is this legal? Honestly, literally that is a question I've always been asking. How the hell is the death penalty legal? It shouldn't be legal, guys. It needs to. I've said this a few times in this video. This needs to go.
18, the BBC reported that one man in Florida was screaming and thrashing before he was executed, screaming to everyone that they were murdering an innocent man. One warden said the first thing that catches his eye is that gurney, which is the place he's going to die. If it is lethal injection, which it often is, the prisoner is told to sit on the gurney and then lay down. There will be a tie-down team, each responsible for a part of the prisoner's body. Doctors will usually not be at the execution because it's not in line with their code of ethics, so there will be a special team to administer the drugs. This is not always easy, as the veins tend to hide during this stressful time. Some of them had burnt veins from drugs, which would make the process longer and more painful, said one former warden. When the catheters are in place, the inmate will be secured again. There's about 15 minutes before the execution. Believe it or not, some inmates have got a stay, which means a call to stop the execution during
Okay. I'll end
the
it
last
there.
minutes.
If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you later.